that's the only way to grow food is without putting chemicals on it. For all of us, but for some more sensitive people who now think that they can't eat whatever, piece of produce it was, they think they're allergic to it when they're actually just allergic to the way that fruit has been treated by humans. We have been growing organic food for most of our human history. That is the way we have been doing it most of the time. It's only in the last 50 years or so that we've forgotten how to grow food with nature. And it's been one of my large goals for a long time is to remind people how to do it. This isn't new. We are standing on the shoulders of thousands and thousands and thousands of years of humans living on this planet and eating from it. It's not new. It's not, woo-woo, hippy-dippy. It's the way it's supposed to be grown. And it's the food we're supposed to be eating. We evolved to eat food grown from nutritionally complete soil. And that is how we are our best humans.
Welcome to the Woman's Doctor podcast, helping empower women to embrace their body and soul's full potential. I'm your host, Dr. Trevor Cates, and after 22 years of working with patients, I found the answers to our health struggles are much deeper than most people realize. To help explore this, I'm interviewing colleagues and other wellness experts to get to the root cause so women can realize their true beauty and be informed decision makers for themselves and their loved ones. We've all heard that eating organic is important, but simply finding a label with the word organic is not enough to guarantee we avoid toxins and get nutrient-rich foods. Pesticides have hormone-disrupting effects in the body, and we need nutrients from our foods for proper hormone production and balance. So that's what we're diving into today with my friend and local organic farmer in Park City, Daisy Fair. I interviewed Daisy for my Hormones, Health, and Harmony 9-part documentary series, but most of her interview didn't make it into the docuseries. So we put together some of the highlights from her interview for today's podcast. By the way, isn't that the best name for an organic farmer, Daisy Fair? In this interview, she shares what to look for in the grocery store, questions to ask at farmers markets, and why seasonal produce is better. All of this to make sure your foods are truly free of toxins and are optimally nutrient dense. She even shares tips on how to start your own garden. And after you've watched this podcast, you'll want to know more about seasonal eating. So head over to thespadoctor.com/book to get a copy of my new book, Natural Beauty Reset, which has a 7-day program for each season. So grab your copy so you can get started today. I'm super excited about this new book and can't wait to hear what you think.
Farmer for 18 plus years at this point, feeding the Park City community primarily. I have transitioned to small-scale farm consulting, and my practices are strongly rooted in eco-agriculture. I got into small-scale farming because in the early 80s, my mother had the first organic certification in the state of New Mexico, and she ran an organic apple orchard, and I helped her in the orchard. So that was in my blood. I wanted to be a botanist originally, but in my university journeys, I was convinced that teaching people how to grow food in a sustainable manner is one of the ways we can save the world. And I ended up being a farmer, boots on the ground farmer for 18 years, and was able to help our small community appreciate knowing the land their food is grown on, knowing the people growing their food, and knowing the difference in that food as opposed to buying something at the grocery store that maybe wasn't harvested at its prime nutritional value, and that food that hasn't been treated with toxic, persistent chemicals. Now I've transitioned into farm consulting. There seems to be a lot of interest these days, and for quite a while now, of people wanting to learn how to grow food in the most sustainable way and grow food that is the most nutrient dense for their bodies and for their families. So when people talk about organic and wonder what it means, if it's the best thing for you to be eating, is it truly organic or is it not? That is a very big question. And I think it depends on what decade you're asking that question. It depends on what person you are questioning about their organic practices. Organic is a very broad definition. Currently, we have organic certification, which is a third-party certification process, and then everyone else is kind of shoved into conventional agriculture. And there are so many people who've been shoved into that conventional agriculture box that are growing such amazing food, but have chosen not to go through the organic certification. So before I talk about what organic means, I want to touch on the fact that I think, again, knowing the land that your food is being grown on, having a relationship with your farmer if at all possible, and knowing how they're doing it is the most valuable thing that you can do if you are searching for nutrient-dense, free of toxic chemicals food for your body. Now, when we all go to the grocery store, which we all have to do, especially in climates where there's long winters, when I go to the grocery store, I pick organic over conventional every time, because what I know about organic is that it should be free of persistent toxic chemicals. In my opinion, that is as far as you can go with organic because it's such a broad spectrum of practices that can be used. When organic first came out and became a certified and recognized label on food, I believe it meant far more. It meant a bigger picture about how you farm. It meant farming within nature. It meant having a diversified crops spectrum on your farm. It meant crop rotation. It meant having the microbes in your soil alive because of your farming practices. Then organic really took off and people realized that they could make a lot more money if they had the organic certification. And there were and are a lot of farmers who just transitioned the products they were using so that they could be called organic without changing their farming practices. So that's why I say when you go to the grocery store, the only thing you might be able to tell from organic food is that there are not persistent toxic chemicals on it. But beyond that, you don't really know much about their farming practices unless you research where that food is coming from. It all starts with the soil. Our soils are so complex. If you talk to a soil scientist, they will tell you that they only know a small percentage of the interactions going on in the soil, and they're learning more and more all the time. Nutrients in the soil, something we probably all know about, the macronutrients like nitrogen or phosphorus, potassium. Then there's all these micronutrients, boron, manganese, zinc, sulfur. Those are all very important. That's like the food in the soil, some of the food in the soil for the microbes. But then there's the microbes. They are so important in the soil because they are what process all those nutrients and make them available in the soil in the most plant available form. So you can have all kinds of nutrients in the soil, but if you don't have a healthy microbial population, the plants aren't going to be able to access those nutrients as easily as they can if you have a healthy microbial population. So it all starts with the soil being complete, which is a big picture. And then from there, plants grow, they do it, it's what they're supposed to do. And if then they are harvested at the right time for the crop that you're going for, so a tomato is a fruit crop. And if you harvest that tomato when it is ready and it's been vine ripened, and by vine ripened I mean the vine is still connected to the soil, that is when you're getting the most nutrient dense food. So no matter if it's an asparagus or a carrot or a potato or garlic, or no matter what it is, harvesting at the right time and then getting that produce to the final customer as quickly as possible is what makes the food most beneficial for the humans eating it and the most nutrient dense. I think that humans being depleted of their nutrients is again a big ball, right? But your food is part of it, and how old your food is and the stage of harvest is a big part of it. If you don't get the nutrients in the beginning because the tomatoes were harvested green, the vine was cut, and then they were shipped, that tomato isn't getting that final load of sugars and all the other compounds that the tomato plant would be putting into the fruit when it's ready for that fruit to go on and create more babies. And so if you don't get those nutrients in your system in the beginning, there's less to be pulled out by all the other toxins in our environment. So Although there are so many people who can't access the freshest of food, still, if that food was harvested at the right time, it would still have more nutrients in it than if it's harvested prematurely and allowed to ripen on the shelf or in the truck or any other place. I think that seasonal eating is such a beautiful adventure because it's like living in a four-season town where you're looking forward to fall because of the changing leaf colors. Well, around here, you'd be looking forward to fall because of the potatoes and the squash and the leeks and the stews. And then winter, in a lot of places, it is harder to eat seasonally. We do love our fresh greens all the time. We've learned many lessons over the, centuries that we need fresh food all the time. But there are a lot of amazing season extension practices that can be done in pretty much any climate that has sunlight, so that you can have greens, fresh greens, you can have carrots coming out of the soil in December, in January. You're not going to have tomatoes probably. You could if you want to go deeper into your season extension toolbox. But I think that seasonal eating is totally possible if you're willing to give up just a little bit, like bananas, right? Bananas aren't a thing in our region in the winter, but if you are willing to dive into the adventure of seasonal eating, you are always going to be eating fresher produce, which is always going to be more nutritionally complete and help us be the best humans that we can be. I think that in food choices, you have a great opportunity to avoid toxins. The air we breathe, maybe not so much. There are toxins in the air we breathe, potentially in the water we drink, and we maybe don't have as much control over that. But in your food choices, you can choose to eat the cleanest food available to you. And the toxins that are used in some conventional farming practices are not life-affirming. They are out there to kill things, to kill insects, to kill molds, to kill, the funguses, to kill all kinds of stuff. And I think when you think about it, you realize it's going to do that in your own biome as well. And so from my perspective, it is the easiest way to try to avoid toxins is in the foods that you choose to eat. I have toured many farms over my 18 years of this journey, and I have been to some conventional large-scale farming operations, checking out crops that I didn't grow, so I was excited to see them and touch them and feel them. And I will never forget driving into a cotton field and being so excited because cotton is a beautiful plant, and I leapt out of the truck and I started to head into the field to look at the cotton, and the farmer said to me, "I wouldn't go out there, we just poisoned that last week." And I about fell on my face. And then we got into a conversation about how he drives 40 minutes from where he lives so he can go to the Whole Foods to buy organic food. How his garden is separated enough from his fields so that there's no blowing of the chemicals onto his family's vegetable garden. He'd lost many family members to cancer due to Roundup, etc., that they were using on the farm, and he was very aware of it. But some of those farmers have been shoved into farming practices because of economic reasons, and yet they will not feed their family that food, and they recommend not walking out into the fields during certain times. And I will never forget that. Working at the Coppermoose farm stand was such a great way to connect with all of our customers, and it made farming easier because you'd be out in the field, it'd be hot or windy or cold or whatever it was, and you're thinking, why am I doing this? And then you'd remember little Maddie, who would run through the door on Tuesday mornings so excited about Daisy's carrots because, he'd never tasted carrots like that before and he loved them. And that made the hard work of farming so much easier and more gratifying. So I remember one day in the farm stand, a gentleman walked through and we had some fruit for sale. We didn't grow fruit, but we had a partner farmer who would bring his fruit up, and we had some great apples, and I was telling him about the apples, and he said, I'm allergic to apples. And I thought, allergic to apples? That's an odd one. And then I said, what does it do to you? And he said it made his stomach upset. And I said, have you ever, do you eat organic apples or conventional apples? And he said, I've never thought about it. And much to the horror of my husband, who's on the fire department and in the medical world here, I gave this man an apple that was organic, grown well. And I said, if you feel like it, try that apple. And he didn't try it right then and there. He went home and ate the apple, and he came back next week and he said, Daisy, that apple didn't bother my stomach. I think you must be right. I think it must have something to do with whatever conventional apples are treated with. And I said, yeah, probably you should only do that under the guidance of a doctor, but there may be something there. Especially fruit farmers too, or even vegetable farmers say, well, you can't do that and make money on it if you're growing organic. You just can't make that work. And in my mind, it's the exact backwards, is that's the only way to grow food is without putting chemicals on it. For all of us, but for some more sensitive people who now think that they can't eat whatever, piece of produce it was, they think they're allergic to it when they're actually just allergic to the way that fruit has been treated by humans. We have been growing organic food for most of our human history. That is the way we have been doing it most of the time. It's only in the last 50 years or so that we've forgotten how to grow food with nature. And it's been one of my large goals for a long time is to remind people how to do it. This isn't new. We are standing on the shoulders of thousands and thousands and thousands of years of humans living on this planet and eating from it. It's not new. It's not, woo-woo, hippy-dippy. It's the way it's supposed to be grown, and it's the food we're supposed to be eating. We evolved to eat food grown from nutritionally complete soil. There was no doubt in my mind that I would get the organic certification because that was a box I wanted to be in. I didn't want to be in a conventional box. And that was right kind of in a really big organic explosion. And there were a lot of other farming operations that were jumping onto the organic bandwagon because you could charge more if your food was organic. And I started seeing people in this organic box that I was in, and I no longer belonged in that box because, as my first organic state certifier said to me at the end of his farm tour, which takes all day, he said to me, "Wow, you really mean this?" And I said, "Yeah, what do you mean?" And he told me about the reasons that a lot of other people go into organic farming is just to make more money. And that blew my mind. And so it started my mind churning that I didn't belong in a box with people who were growing 3,000 acres of salad greens organically, because that is not organic to me. You don't turn in your certification. I just stopped applying for it yearly and made it a mission to educate people that there are so many excellent growers producing really fabulous food who are not certified organic. So they are now in that conventional box. And that's why I think if you have the opportunity to know your farmer, that's how you can really know how your food is being grown. You also have to be educated enough to ask the right questions. Asking, do you spray? It's very easy for a farmer to say no, even if they might. Or for a farmer like myself, my answer would be yes. I spray compost tea. I spray Biodynamic 500, Biodynamic 501. I spray fish and kelp. I spray all kinds of stuff. So I think instead of asking, do you spray? Are you organic? Questions like that, you can ask about their fertility program. If you really want to get to know a farmer, say, tell me about your fertility program. Do you use cover crops? Do you use compost? Do you use compost tea? Do you know about biodynamic farming? I can't guarantee this, but I would assume that most people who are farming biodynamically are also doing many, many other wonderful things in their farming practices. And I think that if farmers at farmers markets or, a farm stand are pushed just a little bit more about their farming practices, then if they are not yet, they may start looking into more sustainable, earth-friendly, human-friendly practices. At least I hope so. Government subsidies are a big part of conventional agriculture. Also, the larger an operation gets, crop insurance is something that becomes very worthwhile for a large growing operation to get. Small-scale farmers, don't get any government subsidies. There has been a little bit more grant money available for building hoop houses for small-scale farms, stuff like that, but not the widespread government subsidies that are given to conventional farmers, which allows them to keep their prices lower. And I understand that we need to be able to afford our food, but what it does is distorts the way folks look at the pricing of organic food or really well-grown food, is that small-scale growers aren't getting any subsidies at all. They are charging what it costs to grow that food, and that's actually a lie because it costs far more than they are charging for it. They are charging as high as they can within the marketplace to try to cover their farming costs. And a lot of them are doing a great job at it. I don't want it to sound like organic farming is directly equivalent to financial failure, because that is not the case. But it sure doesn't help when the really large growers who are using, all kinds of chemicals on their products are getting a lot of help from the government. I get goosebumps when I talk to people about starting their first garden or problem solving something they have going on in their current garden. Gardening, no matter what the scale, is so fulfilling. If you plant a seed and you water it, it will grow and it will blow your mind. I think that people can garden in their windowsills, they can garden on their kitchen counters by a window. We can do that in northern climates in the winter. You can do that inside your own house. If you have a lot of lawn, I don't know, think about converting a patch of it to your own garden. I think that people diving into the gardening process at home, once again, we are not far removed from everyone having their own garden, so it's taking us back to our roots, what we're supposed to be doing. It is therapeutic, it is beautiful, it is time outside using your body, and if you are growing the right crops for your bioregion, you will succeed. Sometimes folks run into specific issues with their soils. It can get a little more complicated when you come into those issues, but reach out to your local farmers, see if they can help you out with any questions that you may have. Reach out to consultants like me. There are a lot of really easy steps that you can take to make your garden just take off. I just sent my mom a picture of my garden, my little home garden, and she's been a gardener forever, and she said, "What? Why is everything so big in your garden? My garden's been growing longer than yours." And I started listing off all the things that I do, which are very easy to do. And, that is why my plants are more robust than hers. So there's a lot of really easy things that you can do. You do not have to get bogged down in reading all the gardening books, because that can be really overwhelming. A wonderful thing to do. Do it. But don't let it scare you away from gardening. Start with what you have. Experiment, have fun, make sure you're growing the right crops for your region, because if you're not, they might not do so well, and that'll be discouraging. But I know that any given climate, handful of crops that'll be sure winners, and so gratifying.
If you enjoyed this episode of the Woman's Doctor podcast, be sure to share it with the women in your life and rate and review the show. And to learn all about balancing your hormones, join us for the Hormones, Health, and Harmony 9-part documentary series at hormoneseries.com.